Hi everyone and welcome back. My name is Frank Sullivan here at Digital Craftsmen. This is my colleague Michel Drescher, our Senior Solutions Architect.
Hello.
Hello. We're going to start off our fourth and final video in the series with something that we're not supposed to say on YouTube. What was it, Michel?
I wanted to close the last video with it, but we decided to use it as an opener for today, and that's a quote from a chief security officer from a large and well-known company. And he said, in terms of security and IT security, it's not a question that or whether you're going to be penetrated, it's a question of when.
Said the actress to the bishop, naturally.
Very good is that we don't do advertisements, so we can't be demonetized by YouTube.
Okay, so
let's get serious here.
Let's get serious here. So we're talking about a couple of things here. To close off the series of videos, we're talking about threat intelligence, we're talking about protective monitoring, as we did in the last video, and we're talking about unauthorized access into your network to the point of creating a data breach. What's the impact of that attack? Is it reputational damage? Is it financial damage? Is it legal or regulatory damage? How is this going to impact your business, and on what scale? The first question to ask, I guess, is all data of equal value?
No. There is clear regulation that says certain data is of higher value in terms of requirements of protection. That goes back to a regulation that came into force last year in May 2018, which is known in Europe as GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which by then had to be translated into national law. Here in the UK, that's the Data Protection Act 2018. The German regulation has an unpronounceable name and an even less unpronounceable abbreviation, but basically every member state of the European Union has their own local law that translates the European regulation into local law. And that stipulates that certain personal data can be further differentiated between very sensitive data, such as your gender, your sexual orientation, even religion.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that is extremely health data. It's
yes.
very, very it's sensitive data, and there's private data, such as your name, birthday, where you live, things like that. So GDPR already makes a differentiation between two different data sets on the personal level. On a business level, that really depends on what the data is used for. For example, data that, certain transactional data, contractual data, has an obligation that you need to keep. For example, when you sell somebody something and need to keep the data for audit purposes, tax purposes, or even, warranties and guarantees.
Yeah.
You need to ensure that that you have sold a certain piece of equipment or service to a customer, and that data can there's regulatory requirements, for example, for tax purposes, to keep records for 10 years. And now you have to have a look at how do you protect the data from not necessarily theft, but loss of data. And the loss of data, when a hard drive breaks down and you don't have a backup, you don't have any record anymore. When everything goes very digital, then you have a real problem. It used to be that everything was on paper, but paper is cumbersome. But even in the meantime, when you had your sales dockets from a point of service or from a point of sale, when you got the little receipt that was printed on thermal transfer paper, that stuff is susceptible to UV light. So you should make a copy of that, because otherwise it fades away and you don't have any record of sales anymore when you want to claim warranty on a faulty item.
So hang on, let me unpack all of this a little bit for our viewers. You're saying that there are laws governing how we treat data. Personal data, public data, business data. It could be sensitive, it could be confidential, it could be private, or it could be public. There are different ways of classifying data and therefore determining how you should treat that data. Should it be publicly available on a website for everyone, or should it be double encrypted and anonymized? What we have now is a regulatory framework that says this is how your data should be treated. We have an organizational framework for how long those records or that data should be kept. And we have some security frameworks for how to physically secure that data. This branches off into two topics. There's the security of that data, where we talked about identity and access management, so who can access it. We've talked about encryption, so making sure that unauthorized people can't view it in the event that the data does get out. We've talked about all the different ways of making sure that employees' passwords and general security hygiene is well kept. How are we going about managing threats? That's one. And number two is, let's go back to the very start of this video where you said it's not a question of if, but a question of when a breach is going to occur. How do you recover from something like that?
That's a very multifaceted approach. It requires what I would call disaster plans. Mm-hmm. That's a standard measure in running your organization, really. Yeah. What you do in a situation of disaster, the divine disasters like earthquakes, floodings, or things like that. Mm. How do you establish, again, chain of command? How do you communicate that things have happened? How do you make sure that whatever happened is contained? And this is the big differentiation. Security is all about preventative measures. Safety is about containment, about re-establishing what was before. And in the IT space for that, it's known as, well, you can call it fire drills.
So we're talking about the disciplines within disaster recovery, business continuity, and ultimately asking the question, are we backed up?
Yes, these fire drills actually train on literally how fire drills are trained, where you collect all your people in one building on one collection point in case of fire. You do that in IT as well, where you simulate a breach or a hacking into your system.
Red team, blue team. I've been authorized by the CEO to come and hack the company, and red team has to respond to that.
Exactly. Red team are all those that are called, usually part of the CISRT, Computer Emergency Response Teams, CIRTs. They are the ones that are there for safety. They respond, they're the first responders for when an incident happens, when a data leak happens, when a service goes rogue, starts to consume all your resources or things like that. And they are monitored by the red team, who's authorized to do these kind of things. How well do you respond? What's your first response time? What are your communications channels? Who do you inform? When do you inform them? And how do you inform them? And these are done in a regular way and regular intervals, but the blue team never knows what's hitting them. This is by design that way, and is very closely related to what's called penetration tests. There are physical penetration tests, physical access to buildings. One of the prime reasons that companies start to outsource their IT systems into co-location, into co-hosting, because you locate IT services in one building, and it's far easier to secure one building than if everybody has it on premise and you have to secure 20 buildings. Yeah? You do the same with IT, with your IT estate. You allow people to circumvent your security measures to actually look at how secure is your system. This prevents misconfiguration. If you look back at the very first video we had where we looked at encryption of your communications between the customer and the website, you can misconfigure that, make it prone to spying and prying eyes.
Or just naturally let it time out. We talked about examples of SSL, which is now out of date.
Exactly, yes.
Of tender-loving security.
Yes.
TLS. You know, it's very important that we discuss how to structure a fire drill. That's the starting point for any security audit. And we're saying, are we backed up? Where are we backed up? In the cloud, archived, data centers. What we haven't really talked about is how quickly can we recover. Let's say that we define a recovery point objective. You're saying what's mission critical. Not all data is created equally. What has to be restored first, in what order, and how quickly can my business recover in the event of a breach?
Yes, this very much depends on the business, on the sector you're in, depending on the regulation. Some sectors are more regulated than others, for good reason. And therefore you have those regulatory requirements for data recovery, data or prevention of data loss. You have less regulated systems or sectors where you can be more relaxed about these kind of things, where you should be more concerned about your reputational damage, which is on top of regulatory damage, where in the example of GDPR, where you have a breach of personal data, the regulator in the UK, that's the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, they have the power to fine you with up to 4% of your gross turnover. Global annual turnover. And that's a serious financial risk if you don't take the right measures and the right strategies to prevent that.
I couldn't have said it better myself. In this video, we've looked at a number of things. We've looked at fire drills and why it's so important to design those penetration testing schedules, where we play red team, blue team. It's something that we can help you with here at Digital Craftsmen. We've looked at the importance of backups and defining recovery point objectives precisely because not all data is treated equally. There are some mission critical data, not particularly wed to that term. There's some operationally important data, and then there's the rest of it, things that are publicly consumable. But it's really important in closing out this series of videos that it all starts with an audit. The starting point is to understand identity. Am I who I say I am? Do I have the right to be in the system? It's about understanding the configuration and the timetable for upgrading and modernizing our security. It's also really important to understand why a significant amount of security is now outsourced. Not just physical security, but IT security. We talk about security as a service. The role of the managed cloud services provider has become such that it's their responsibility. Whoever is managing your hosting typically won't take responsibility for what you do with that hosting unless there is a service level agreement in place, unless there is a managed services provider wrapped around what you're hosting on AWS, Azure, or GCP, or maybe what you have in your own private cloud or your own data center. It's very important to include that within the scope of the question, am I secure? Finally, I want to conclude with a little note on data and data classification. I'm not sure if you remember, but I had the pleasure of meeting the head of data protection for CERN, who I still remember to this day a little limerick around GDPR. So, my personal data are mine. To abuse them is a crime. You must take care, you must not share or risk a hefty fine. I thought that just beautifully packaged everything up in GDPR and data security perfectly.
Beautiful.
So, credit where credit is due.